Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to SFF 180 Horror. On today's episode, a young mother must help herself, her children, and her community to survive a day of sacrifice on a remote island off the British coast in Jennifer Thorne's Lute. That's the book I'm reviewing, and as you can all see, I am still traveling, not in my office, and so that explains why it has been a while since I've brought you any new videos. I'm very sorry about that, but it's great to be back. And no, it is definitely not in my nature to sit outside on a freezing cold windy day in front of a lake to do a book review, but I cannot deny this is a beautiful and appropriate setting to talk about folk horror, and so here I am. Folk horror is a vibe, first and foremost, but it has much to say about human nature. The formula is simple. You need an isolated community that has rejected modernity in favor of ancient customs that are more sinister than benign. You need an outsider drawn into this environment who confronts these sinister forces. But you also need to convey a clear notion of the actual threat. A story about a monster in the woods is not necessarily folk horror. It's just a monster story. The best folk horror reminds us that the real threat does not stem from nature or even the supernatural, but from people, their belief systems, and how they choose to act on them. Those chanting, singing hippies who wear robes and toss you into a wicker man and burn you to death don't do it because some ancient god told them to, but because they believe it with their whole hearts. Lute is a folk horror novel that tries to subvert many of these tropes, but only with intermittent success. Jennifer Thorne sets her story on the fictive island of the book's title, situated in England's Bristol Channel, against a near-future backdrop of global war over water and other dwindling resources. The residents of Lute are doing pretty well, protected from the travails of the outside world as long as, every 7 years, they observe the ritual of the day. Over the course of one day, 7 lives must be taken as tribute to whichever strange gods watch over the island and its people. Nina is an American expat married to Hugh Treadway, the Lord of the Manor. Now, nearly 7 years before the story opens, Nina fled a cold and emotionally abusive family in Florida, where her only ally was her ailing grandmother. She met Hugh aboard an ocean liner, and they married after a whirlwind shipboard romance. I suspect any romance reader could have warned Nina right off the bat that she was letting herself in for a world of trouble. Nina now has 2 young children, and life on the island has been pretty nice, although she has never really gotten used to living as Lady of the Manor. But now the day is coming, and as many of the island's residents are leaving for the duration, Hugh's attempts to evacuate Nina and the children are thwarted by a bad boat engine. Now, Nina is confronted head-on with the fact that after nearly 7 years on the island, she's still an outsider, unsure of what her role is supposed to be as the day approaches. Hugh is becoming more distant and emotionally aloof, which is the foreshadowing equivalent of setting off a foghorn, and there is massive tension between Nina and Hugh's childhood buddy Matthew, which is the foreshadowing equivalent of setting off 2 foghorns and a fireworks display while a band plays the William Tell Overture. From the start, readers are going to have questions. You see, what makes the day so scary is that the 7 deaths happen at random, kind of like Final Destination. I mean, you could simply die by slipping in the bathtub. There are no pagans in robes holding midnight rituals in a spooky grove, even though Thorne does actually have a spooky grove on her island as a huge red herring. But then you might ask, why doesn't everyone just evacuate the island? This is where Thorne shows both her strengths and shortcomings in setting the rules. Now, much of the tension between characters does rest on who has a responsibility to Lute and its people, to place the needs of the community above personal considerations. But Thorne never really makes it clear what the broader consequences might be if no one stays. Presumably the island's veil of protection will be lifted, but by whom? Or what? There's a bigger picture here that Thorne only teases us with. On the one hand, it's chilling when Nina realizes that no one on the island has any clue who or what entities they are being sacrificed to. But wispy dream sequences featuring glowing beings and the hoofbeats of an unseen horse are just vague supernatural window dressing. They don't really illuminate anything. The supernatural elements in the story, if anything, just feel like an afterthought. On the other hand, the book is very successful as a character piece. Thorne is much more invested in Nina's personal journey, and she gives her protagonist a strong narrative voice. Nina starts the story mostly passive, lacking confidence and agency, which we quickly learn is the damage that she has sustained from her upbringing that makes her either act foolishly or fail to act at all, out of fear. And so Lute becomes the story of how Nina overcomes and self-actualizes. And while the book doesn't rise all that well to some of the challenges of good folk horror, because to be honest, too much is predictable, Thorne still gives us some excellent dramatic scenes and shows a really good grasp of how to use folk horror's metaphorical qualities. Most of us go through life understanding that we're at the mercy of forces we can't control. And so it's up to us to be grateful for every day and to build the best life for ourselves and our families and those around us during whatever brief time we might have. Because for each of us, one day, the day will come. And that is it. That's all I have time for in this episode of SFF 180. Remember, the most important thing, these are reviews. You are not always going to agree with me, but if you enjoyed watching, please hit the like button, share the video far and wide with all of your SFF and horror reading friends. And above all, please subscribe if you have not done so. That is how the channel grows. You can also support the channel at my TeePublic store and at my Patreon, where recruits into Wink's Army sometimes get little perks like early access to some of my videos if I finish them in time. But also, I use the Patreon money to pay Matt Olson, my amazingly talented and gifted channel artist who does all my thumbnails and things for me. So that extra support is greatly appreciated. Thank you so much. I want to thank all the rest of you guys for being the very best viewers in all of BookTube, and until I see all of you next time, I'm not going to do the finger snaps because my fingers are too cold, but stay safe and healthy and spooky reading.